Now, President Trump has sent a long letter to Nancy Pelosi, the Democrat leader of the House of Representatives, condemning the impeachment inquiry as an unprecedented and unconstitutional abuse of power and accusing her of declaring open war on American democracy. The US Congress will vote tomorrow on whether to impeach Mr. Trump over claims that he attempted to get Ukraine to produce information on one of his potential rivals for the 2020 election. Impeachment is the two-stage process by which a sitting president can be removed from office. Firstly, it goes to the House of Representatives, where it requires a majority of the 435 members to vote for it. If that passes, a trial would then be held in the US Senate, and that requires a two-thirds majority, that's 67 of the 100 senators, to remove a sitting president. In the unlikely event that that did happen, Donald Trump could then be forced from the White House. But before all that, Democratic representatives in districts where there is a strong Republican presence are coming under intense pressure not to back the moves. Our North America editor John Sopel reports now from Michigan.
Oh, say does that star...
In America, even a bog-standard town hall meeting like this one in Michigan comes wrapped in the stars and stripes.
Or the land of the free.
But over the impeachment of Donald Trump, it's a disunited states. And the congressmen and women who'll vote tomorrow on this, like Elisa Slotkin, are under acute pressure from their voters. She's a Democrat who won her seat from the Republicans last year in a wealthy district 30 miles north of Detroit.
Thank you, guys. Okay.
And she was struggling to make her voice heard.
Okay, so I'm just going to continue because I got the mic. Folks, these are the questions you're shouting at me, so you may want to just listen for 1 sec to the answer.
Take a breath.
One of the hecklers is Bill Rowerdink. He's come with a group of Republicans to stir things up. I spoke to him in the cafeteria afterwards. You were there calling her out. What do you think the political consequences are?
Well, I think her self-awareness, self-perception is very good. She said this vote may end my short-lived political career. I think that's really good self-assessment.
But the Congresswoman says she's doing what's right. The president's attempt to strong-arm Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden went too far.
When it comes to something like asking foreigners to intervene and get engaged here at home, that to me requires a response. It can't become normal to just reach out to foreigners. I know it sounds different, but there just has to be some decisions that are beyond the political calculus. And it may be that voters decide in 2020 that they don't want me as their representative.
Jingle bells, jingle bells.
There are other preoccupations at this time of year, though, like present buying and wondering who's paying the town's electricity bill. But impeachment too. What do you think of the move to impeach him?
I think it's ridiculous. They're wasting a lot of taxpayers' money.
At this point, leave it to the voters. It's close enough.
The economy is doing phenomenally well.
He's the most corrupt man who's ever served in that office. He's exactly what the founding fathers intended when they came up with the idea of impeachment.
He's not fit for office. He's embarrassing.
America is so polarized on this, isn't it?
Yes, it's all or nothing. It's going to be an interesting Christmas.
Forget White Christmas. Here in Rochester, Michigan, they go in for Bright Christmas. And the one thing that Elisa Slotkin is dreaming of is that it should be a backlash-free Christmas. Because it's perfectly possible that the biggest casualties of this impeachment process could be the Democratic Party itself. John Sopel, BBC News, Michigan.
Now, on the eve of another big day in the impeachment process, President Trump laid into his Democrat opponents again, insisting they would not get away with inventing things if they were in a country like Guatemala. Why Guatemala, you may well ask. For one thing, President Trump was meeting its president today. For another, Mr. Trump said making things up there would be handled in a much tougher way. What could he possibly mean?
The rituals of this great office are continuing without missing a beat. Even as the White House tonight readies itself for the darkest and gloomiest day of the Trump presidency.
How are you?
He was greeting the leader of Guatemala, but Central America was not exactly on his mind. Instead, from the Oval Office under the portrait of George Washington, he denounced the move by Congress. Tomorrow, the 45th president will join the company of the 17th and 42nd. the only presidents to have suffered the humiliation of impeachment.
I'm not watching. I've not seen it. Look, it's a hoax. The whole impeachment thing is a hoax. We look forward to getting onto the Senate. We're not entitled to lawyers. We're not entitled to witnesses. We're not entitled to anything in the House. It's a total sham.
And then he darkly hinted that his guest wouldn't even tolerate it.
In Guatemala, they handle things much tougher than that.
The president also evoked the old conspiracy theory that the deep state had always been working against him.
They know it's a hoax, it's a witch hunt, and it's just a continuation. It's been going on now for almost 3 years, and it probably started before I even won the election.
The Rules Committee will come to order.
Tonight, the House of Representatives is still paving the way for tomorrow's historic vote against the president.
He tried to shake down the government of Ukraine, to basically get dirt on his political opponent to help him in the upcoming 2020 election.
He used $391 million.
With Democrats in control of the House, impeachment is now inevitable. Even if the Republican leader in the Senate was making equally clear today that the upper chamber will not vote to remove the president from office.
Let's try to have a civil conversation, okay?
For some Democrats, as they meet with constituents ahead of the most important vote of their lives, the divisions triggered by impeachment are on open display. This centrist Democrat from Michigan was greeted by cheers from her supporters and raucous protests from Trump loyalists. As she tried to explain that she would vote for impeachment, just listen to the response. Tonight, the president has compared his impeachment to the infamous Salem witch trials of the 17th century. There can be no greater sign of how vitriolic and poisonous this impeachment has become.
Well, the president himself wrote to the most senior Democrat, Nancy Pelosi, today to set out his gripes. In fact, less a letter, more an essay, thesis, rant, call it whatever you want. Robert joins us from Washington to talk about it. Robert, this is quite some letter.
That is right, Tom. It's difficult to describe this letter from the president to the Speaker of the House. You could call it withering, blistering, maybe slightly, frankly, unhinged. In this letter, President Trump tells Nancy Pelosi that she has declared open warfare on American democracy and is engaged in a libelous and vicious crusade against him. He calls the first article of impeachment that will be voted on tomorrow a disingenuous, meritless, baseless invention of your imagination. He goes on to compare it, as I reported, to the Salem witch trials and adds that it is a coup against him. So this is political warfare breaking out here on Capitol Hill ahead of a vote that will happen in about 24 hours' time. There is no doubt that this vote will pass. There were a few wavering centrist Democrats. They've almost all come down in favor of impeachment. So by this time tomorrow, this president will have been impeached. He'll be the third American president to be impeached, and that is a black mark that will live on against his name in the history books.
Robert, there were lots of exclamation marks in the letter. For now, thank you very much.